Good morning and welcome to Saturday Morning Cereal. Hopefully you guys are enjoying a great Saturday breakfast. We always like to have special breakfast on Saturday with the cats, and so I feed them some special tuna and so forth that they don't normally get, so they like that. And then, Vicky and I get to have, sausage and eggs or, whatever we have. So hopefully you guys are having, oatmeal or cereal or coffee or something on this Saturday morning. It's been really cold here, so a hot beverage is a great thing to have right now for sure. Now I know it's probably not as cold here in Texas as it is in some of the places up north where you guys are getting pounded with snow. But in the it's cold enough to freeze water outside here, and so that's, as a Texan, that's cold enough for me. But anyway, what I wanted to cover with you this week was we received the prints of the digital files from our January set of Patreon, the Monster Babes. So I've got Carmilla and a little sprue with all of her accessories and parts, and so I wanted to show you some clips and pictures of what those prints look like compared to what we were able to print them with our Anycubic photon printer here. And you can see that there's quite a difference in the level of detail. So I wanted to kind of show you that. I will be molding those. They'll be going to mold this week. So I'll be taking pictures, maybe shoot a little video of that, and I'll be sharing that with you next weekend as we go through the production process of getting those models prepped and ready to put into the web store. Okay, here are the pieces that I've received from VisionProto, and this is how they came. He packaged them in these really soft paper towel pieces here. So I don't know if the camera is going to be able to see all of the details on these pieces or not, and so what I'll probably wind up having to do is cut in some close-ups and so forth. But here's what we got from VisionProto for Queen Aminette, and I don't know if it's going to focus on that, but here's the piece that I printed out on our Anycubic photon, and you can see that they're the same size. So what the differences are that you'll be able to tell right off, actually looking at them in person, is the crisp edges on the bandages, the wrappings and so forth on there, the crisp edges along the knife blade, and the back of the hair. So there's some really sharp, crisp details on that that you'll be able to see. Plus the detail on her the around the front of the figure. So I was really happy with the way that those turned out. Here's the print of Gilly, and I had to actually go back and beef up Gilly's hands a little bit. Now the folks on the Patreon got the updated files for that, for Gilly, for her arms, because when I first printed her pieces, the hands came out a little bit thin on there. So what I wanted to do was kind of thicken those up a little bit so that they would be a little beefier. So here's our print of Gilly, and here's the piece from VisionProto, printed on their high-resolution printers. So as you can see, it's like this gives me a really good idea, the Anycubic photon, of pretty much what I'm going to expect to get from the piece. But it seems like that the edges of her scales and so forth are coming out, and the gills, they're coming out a little bit sharper and crisper on the edges and so forth. So we want to be sure that the miniatures that we're putting out have the highest level of detail that you're going to get from that particular sculpt, because if I've spent all the time in putting all those little details in there, we want to make sure that those translate to the models that you're going to wind up getting to paint, on your end of things. So all of the seaweed and so forth on there came out really, the edges of that came out really sharp, and it's really crisp more so than you would get with sculpting those in putty. So it's there's some stuff that you can actually do with this that you can get a much better detail than sculpting them by hand. Even though I'm sculpting them by hand on the computer. So but anyway, so the other one that I wanted to show you here was the bride. And so I've got Elsa the bride, and she also because of the wrappings and so forth on it, she came out really crisp, and the details are really fine on there. So I was pretty happy with that. So anyway, so what we'll do is we'll move along next and show you guys what we'll need to do to get these ready to put on mold. Now, the way that they come in, Paul's already cleaned these and gotten all of the excess resin off of them or whatever, so they're dry and as far as that goes. But there's still parts on the supports that will need to be filed off, and then part of the supports and stuff still haven't been removed, on the back. So I'll need to go over these models with the Optivisor and make sure that all of the little tiny bumps and things that are not supposed to be on there are removed. And then what we'll do is we'll move on to, once these are all cleaned up, we'll move on to molding and casting. And I will show you how I put the supports on there for actually to key them, and I've got these little tabs to put on their feet that say Bombshell Miniatures on there. So basically I'll be gluing those on there. I will show you how that goes, and then how they'll be sprued in order to create gates and vents in the molds in order to cast them in resin. So we'll move on to molding and casting with those pieces, and I will show you kind of that process next week on our next episode. However, this week I kind of wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the sculpting that's been going on. In addition to some of the client work that I can't really show you yet. I've been doing lots of stuff for some of the things that we're doing, here for Bombshell Miniatures. Coming up in May, we're planning on going back to Wonderfest this year. We've got a great spot at our table. And so for the last couple of years, we've been wanting to put out, Vicki and I have been talking about doing the Vivian Gale piece in 1/5 scale. So she's going to be probably like a 14-inch resin kit. So it's going to be pretty big sized. And the cool thing about that is that the art that Izzy Collier did for that character is very detailed, with like all the rivets and the armor plating and so forth for the diving suit and everything. So it lends itself to translating as to a larger scale kit like that. So we're pretty excited about being able to produce that, and I'm sculpting it all in ZBrush, and we'll be sending that out to print. So I will, as that goes along and we get closer to Wonderfest in May, at the end of May, I'll be going through and showing you guys the production process of what it took to mold and cast that and get that packaged up and ready for the show. That's probably going to be our largest kit that we've produced to date, and so it's going to be a milestone piece for us, and it's something that we're really excited about here to be able to do. Some of the other things that I worked on this week, I wanted to talk about Patreon a little bit. I guess it's the February set. Yeah, the February set of Terry's Crew is still available on Patreon. So for $9, there's still some early backer slots on that. You can get that whole set of downloads, and that's going to include, the Terry, the Arcane Gun Mage. So it's going to be that character, our little goblin mechanic, and we've got the Arcane Construct and the big Iron Golem robot. So you'll be able to get all those, and then our bomb kits and everything. So hop on over to Patreon, take a look at the pictures and stuff over there. I don't want to spend a lot of time on that because we've covered that in some previous videos. But I wanted to talk about next month because I've already started sculpting and adapting some of the pieces that I wanted to do for March. Now, on our poll over on Patreon, everybody voted up Cyberpunk as March's topic. So I'm going to be rounding that out with a couple of more characters. So it'll probably be into the first week of March or so, since I'm working on some other things, before I'll be able to have those characters and that set of models ready for download, because I want to make sure I add some extra goodies in there. Of course, all the bomb kit stuff is going to stay on Patreon, so you'll be able to continue to download that and the core base set. I would like to be able to make new textured bases and make those available too, so that's in the works. But what I spent most of the time doing this week on when I was working on the Patreon stuff, was I repurposed the Chrissy figure that we had from Babes 4. Now, if you backed the Babes 4 project and you got Chrissy in resin, you already have that model. But what I wanted to do was, and I talked about this at that time, was to take that and create modular character or character parts where, she would have different poses for her legs, different arm poses, and then maybe a couple of different torso types or something. But definitely some different helmets. And so that way you would have a little collection of parts in a kit that would be modular, that you could kind of put together in different poses and that sort of thing. I'm also trying to still figure out how I could incorporate the flight bases that I made before, that we're looking at creating for our Space Aces for Counterblast. So I had done some work on those. Those may be available with this set as STL download that you can use to put your your hard suit models on, so they're flying, and that kind of thing. So I'm looking at seeing how possible it is to include that with it. Okay, so the other stuff that I did was I wanted to do like some cyber cops, and so I went and found some other reference on the internet in addition to, what you would commonly, think of, for those particular kinds of characters, and tried to come up with something that was a little bit generic. So I created a video. I recorded the sculpting process, and I kind of broke it down into little sections. So there was about a 30-minute sculpting session that I did for like some of the parts. And so I kind of recorded, that section of it, and then I spliced it all together and did a little time lapse so that you can kind of see what went into that. And that's over on the what is it? The YouTube channel. It's my ZBrush playlist. So you can look in the ZBrush sculpting playlist, and the Cycops is in there, so that you can kind of see, how that whole process went. So if you got some time, I recommend taking a look at that, and seeing what was involved with creating that. There again, it's a modular type of a thing where I wanted to do several parts. So the picture that you're looking at here is one of the poses that I did just as, to kind of wrap up the video and sort of show a turntable of, what that was going to look like. So with that, I also I got some feedback. Nick had messaged me and said, hey, the gun looks a little big. So, and I agreed, because as I was working on that, I thought, oh, I've got to scale it up, for the hands. So that's looking a little big. So this is still a work in progress. But I'm hoping to get those parts dialed in and get some more poses for, legs and arms and everything, before I upload that to Patreon, and you'll be able to get those STL files then. And then, as with anything, this Cyberpunk set that we're going to do is going to be available as STL download first over on Patreon. Then at the end of the Patreon cycle, in April, we'll move those to the web store, and you'll be able to download the individual parts, individual characters or little bundles in the STL section of the web store. Then, of course, we're going to send those files out to print, and we'll be getting them back just like the Monster Babes. So we're kind of creating the cycle of, putting those digital files out and then putting those into production here. And hopefully over that time, I'll be able to show you how all of that works, just like we're doing with the Monster Babes. So when Vicki and I talked about, what we were looking at doing for kind of relaunching Bombshell Miniatures 2.0, we talked about, how we could kind of incorporate the digital printing and moving that, along the pipeline to actually putting out the resin pieces. So, we're pretty excited about how it's been working so far. And we certainly appreciate all the support and everything that you guys have given us. I've been watching the numbers click, as far as watching the videos and everything. And I certainly appreciate you guys taking the time, out of your Saturday mornings to spend that with me and talk about some of the stuff that we're doing here at the Bomb Shop, Bombshell Factory. So as we go forward, I'm going to be showing you guys some of the other areas that we work in. This, of course, is the studio here that I'm sitting in. So I've got, my ZBrush, set up here for sculpting digitally. And then we were over at the workbench just a minute ago where I was showing you, where the, where I sculpt practically, where I can clean up the models and all that. And then what I'll show you in the future episodes is we're going to go back to, molding and casting, and I'll show you some guys, I'll show you guys some stuff that, we've got set up back there. So anyway, I will let you get back to your Saturday. I have a ton of work to do, and I will be showing you more of it next week. So I will see you then.